Good morning, everybody. I'm Jacob Now, Training and Development Manager at Russell Tree Experts. This morning, we're gonna go over truck-mounted grapple maintenance. For this video, we're gonna be covering the Palfinger Epsilon M13A. The Prentice loaders and the Circa loader are gonna vary a little bit, so keep that in mind. Personal protective equipment, PPE, for truck-mounted grapple maintenance is going to include having some sort of helmet or hard hat because we are going to be working at height for some of these things, and just to even get into the grapple truck, you're going to be up at about 10, 12, 14, even 16 feet. You're going to need some safety glasses, ANSI Z87 or Z87 Plus approved. Your normal work attire, so some sort of shirt with some high-vis pants, over the ankle boots. And then you're also going to really want either some nitrile gloves and or a pair of work gloves, because you are going to be getting greasy and potentially dealing with hydraulic fluid, which is never good to get on your skin. Some equipment and items that you're going to need for grapple maintenance is going to be as follows. On every truck for the pre-trip, you should have a roll of wrenches. I've already taken some out because we're going to be using some of these. The 1.5 inch wrench, to note, is not normally included on the wrench roll, so you may have to get one of those for the application we'll talk about later. You should have a spill kit or a cleanup kit for hydraulic fluid and any other fluids that maybe you encounter and have some sort of a spill with, because we are going to get a little messy. For greasing, again, you're going to definitely want some gloves for grease and hydraulic fluid. You may use a Milwaukee battery-powered grease gun or a manual hand pump grease gun. You're going to want extra cans of grease. So we use some of this red and tacky stuff for the grapples. Then you're also going to want chain lubricant for the grapple chain, the grapple boom chain, and you're going to want white lithium grease for some of the slides. Other equipment, you may want to use a step ladder if you need it. You may do all of this maintenance inside the box, which makes it a little bit easier to get to some of these points. But if you have to bring the grapple outside of the truck box, then you're going to maybe want a step ladder just to assist in you getting to things for good work positioning. A few other things. Paper towels are always really nice to keep handy, especially for greasing, because it keeps your grease gun clean, keeps your gloved hands clean and everything else clean. And then lastly, if you're replacing hydraulic hoses, you're obviously going to need new hydraulic hoses. All right, we want to cover a few key terms and just sections of the grapple, just so you can familiarize yourself with it. If you have problems with certain sections of the grapple, knowing where and what the problem is will help the mechanics further understand what you need help with. We have the Circa grapple head, right? This is the same or very similar with all of our grapples. We run a very similar grapple head on all of them. You have your rotation hydraulic hoses, right? Then you have your telescopic boom here, like so. You have your telescopic boom chain up top here. You have the 2 boom mounted lights. And then you have 2 operator platform mounted lights. Right here you have the pivot point of the upper boom and the lower boom, right? And you're gonna have 1 hydraulic cylinder on top, and you're gonna have the other hydraulic cylinder on the bottom. At the rear of the vehicle, you can get a really good view of the A-frame, right? This is the structure that holds everything together. On the A-frame, you're gonna find both of your stabilizer outriggers right, on the driver and passenger side. You're also going to find your hydraulic fluid cooler, looks like a radiator, right? And then you're going to have a bit of an access for the larger hoses that run from the hydraulic tank to the turret and all of the assemblies inside. You can use either the driver's side or the passenger side ladders to access the operator's platform, but when the grapple is stowed in the box, this operator platform is going to be on the passenger side. Now I'm sitting in the operator platform. You have two joysticks here for maneuvering the grapple. You have two handles for raising and lowering your outriggers, and you have a foot switch for rotation. A very important term to know and a part is going to be what's called a grease zerk, or you may hear it be described as a grease fitting. People that don't know it may call it a metal nipple. What this does is it receives the grease and allows the grease to expand inside these two metal parts. The purpose of the grease is to reduce the amount of friction between two moving metal pieces, because the more friction you have, the more wear the metal pieces are going to have, and eventually it's going to wear to a point where it needs to be replaced. That can be incredibly expensive in the wrong areas. Another component of the grapple is going to be the hydraulic fluid tank, right? This is where all of your hydraulic fluid lives as it gets pumped to where it needs to be. This is going to be located on the passenger side of the vehicle. However, grapple trucks may vary. They're all built a little bit different, right? You're also just above, you're going to have the hydraulic fluid fill cap. You're going to need a wrench, the appropriate size wrench, to loosen this, to then add hydraulic fluid to it when necessary. Whenever we're working on hydraulic systems, we want to make sure that they're not pressurized. To ensure that we do so, we need to turn the PTO of the grapple truck off, and then we need to turn the truck off and take the key with us to ensure that no one turns it on accident while we're working on it. All right, now we're going to talk about the chain tensioning. This chain on top of the grapple boom assists in retracting the telescopic parts. It's common because all of these pieces of equipment are going to have vibration, that the nut inside here is going to start backing out, and this chain is going to become looser and looser and looser until, when you can see it from the operating platform, when you suck the boom in, the chain will bottom out and hit the top of the boom and pretty much not do anything. Per the instructions, the first step you're going to want to do is extend the telescopic boom all the way out, and then you're going to want to retract it by 12 inches. When you retract it by 12 inches, then you can truly see the amount of play that you have in this chain. Like you see in step 3 of that diagram, you want no more than 5/8 inches of play in that chain. If you have too much play, or even if it's too tight per se, then you're going to need to get under this shield here and adjust the nut and the bolt. To get into this cover, you're going to need a 3/4 inch wrench, and you're going to need to loosen these two bolts here. I've already loosened them. Once you loosen those bolts, right, you're going to remove both of them like so, and then you're going to pick this cover up, and it's going to expose the nut and the threaded bolt that we need to get to. Once you've put that cover and the two bolts in a safe spot, then you can have a quick glance, make sure everything in here looks the right way. These are hard lines, right? We're going to take a quick look at these, make sure that they're not beat up, there's no cracks, nothing like that. Then we can focus on this nut here and this bolt, which comes out and in to tension this cable. This is where you're going to need the 1.5 inch wrench, because that's going to fit over the bolt nicely. And then you're going to need to take another wrench, no particular size, but you're going to want to capture the chain in there so that it doesn't turn with the bolt. If I don't have this wrench to help aid me, what's going to happen is the bolt is just going to start to twist and torque the chain, and that's not what we want. We want the chain to be parallel to the boom. Then you can either tension or loosen the chain. So right now I'm loosening the chain, right? You can barely see the threaded bolt coming out, or I can go the opposite way and I can tighten it, right? All the while keeping an eye on the chain, right? And this is going to require some trial and error to see if the chain tension is too loose or too tight or just right. Once you are satisfied with chain tension, then you're going to need to replace the cover that protects these hard lines, right? Just put the cover back on. Don't drop the bolts. Line up the bolt. Hand tighten, right? Until you can no longer hand tighten, right? And then tighten that down with 3/4 inch wrench. And that's how you would either loosen, tighten, and just plain adjust the tension of the chain on top of the Palfinger grapple boom. All right, now we're going to talk about greasing the grease zerks or the grease fittings on these Palfinger grapples. We use Circo brand grapple heads. These Circo heads are going to have, with the Palfinger, they're going to have 9 grease fittings. 1, 2, number 3 is here, and number 4 is on the other pin. This is what the head rotates on. 5, 6, 7, then you're going to have number 8 and number 9 to finish off greasing the head. So now that we've located the grease fittings or the grease zerks, we're going to take our grease gun, right, that's prepped and full of grease, and then what we're going to do is we're going to mate the two together. So the grease zerk and the end of the grease tube or the grease gun go together, right? And then you give it some firm pressure and then you start pumping grease into it. Now, if you run into the problem where you can't even see the grease fitting, that's typically because dirt, grease, and other things have gotten jammed into this hole where the grease fitting is located. I like to take a little stick. It's very easy to find in the grapple box, and I can take this and I can clean out the space around the fitting like so, and then I can get to the grease fitting easier. Once you have a solid connection with the grease fitting, then you're going to grease to purge, which means you're going to be looking while you're pumping grease to see any new red grease that comes out of the area or the mating of the two metal parts that you're trying to grease. So right there, that's what we're looking for. And the reason behind that is because now we know that there is new grease all the way from the grease fitting to where it exits. And we do that for all of our fittings. Sometimes a grease fitting is going to be stubborn and doesn't want to take grease. I want to show you what that looks like. So if you put the grease gun on, you give firm pressure towards the grease fitting. Sometimes it's going to want to pump out like that, right? That grease fitting is not taking grease. It's just pushing grease out and around the grease gun and the grease fitting. So two options. You can have two options with this. Either you need to turn the grapple on and maneuver this fitting a little bit or adjust it somehow, or if that doesn't work, the grease fitting may be plugged up and you'll want to talk to a fleet mechanic about that grease fitting. All right, now we're moving on to the boom section of greasing. So I have manipulated the boom into a different position. If you feel this is a better position, you're welcome to do that as well. You can move the boom however you need to, in a safe manner to get to the greasing points. Conveniently, there are also 9 greasing points on the boom of the grapple before you get to the turret. The greasing points are as follows: 1, 2, and 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Note that the 6th fitting is broken. That will need to be replaced. That should be something that you talk to a shop mechanic about. Grease fitting 8 is on the bottom of the cylinder, right here. Grease fitting 9 is on the top of this lower cylinder, right here. The next section is the turret itself. So the turret ring has a number of grease fittings on it. You can see 1 and 2 right here. And if we are going to pretend that this is 0, every 90 degrees you have another 2. So there should be 3 and 4 over here. 5 and 6 on the back side. And 7 and 8 over here. Number 9 is the bottom of this cylinder. 10 and 11 are up here on top of the rotation, and then 12 is up here hiding between the hoses and the hard lines, and that's for this pivot point. Grease fitting 13 is located here above grease fittings 10 and 11. So for these last 2 grease zerks, you're going to want to rotate slowly, ensuring that your boom is not going to hit anything. So this is going to be greasing the inside of the rotation. Make 1 revolution around, switch to the other zerk, and make another revolution. The last part of greasing for the Palfinger Epsilon M13A is going to be greasing the stabilizers, right? Now, these are all the way extended, right? And it's important to note as you look down the truck, notice that the rear axles are off the ground, right? That's a safety concern if you're not on level ground, because your parking brake only works when those tires are making contact with the ground. So you need to do this on flat ground. But in order to grease all of the stabilizer or outrigger, whatever you prefer, you are going to need to extend them all the way out and then take your same grease gun. This one's actually in pretty good shape. It's been well greased. And you're going to want to either take your grease gun and just start painting globs of grease onto it, like so, or you can take a tube of grease and you can lather it on with a gloved hand, a paintbrush, whatever you feel is necessary. But you should have a nice coating of grease over time. It's going to turn black because of dirt and grime and things, but what you don't want to see is shiny metal. Okay, so you're going to do that on all 4 sides, making sure that we get a nice even coating, right? Something like this, where this is a nice even coating of grease, right? There's not a single shiny part on it. And then you're going to want to do that for both sides. Once that's done, you can turn the truck back on, retract the grapple outriggers or stabilizers, and then you have finished greasing. This whole greasing process should take anywhere from probably 15 to 20, 25 minutes. 15 minutes if you do it routinely, and it should be done at least once a week. But it may take you a little bit longer if you're not used to doing it or you're just learning. So hopefully this helps. Sometime during your greasing, you're likely going to run out of grease in your grease tube. So you're going to need to go grab another one. But the bigger question is, how do you know when you've run out of grease? The biggest distinction that I can think of is the sound is actually different. All right, to change the empty grease tube in Milwaukee battery-powered grease gun, first you're going to need to pull this handle back. It's going to be kind of tight. There's a depress right here, or a little detent rather, right, that captures the handle. Otherwise it's going to want to sink back down in. You're going to capture the handle so that it's all the way out. And then what you're going to do is you're going to loosen this, lefty-loosey, righty-tighty. And this whole aluminum sleeve is going to come out of the device like that. Then you're going to take your gloved finger and you're going to grab the inside lip and you're going to pull the spent grease tube out that's empty. You're going to remember to discard that once you're done with this process. You're going to take your new grease tube, and it comes with a pop tab on one end and a cap on the other, just a plastic cap. You're going to take that plastic cap off, like so. I'm going to get rid of some of the grease on my finger. I'm going to dispose of that as well. And then the open side of the tube is going to go down into the sleeve, like so, so that the pop tab is upright. It's important to observe that the pop tab hasn't been dented or cracked, because if so, it's not going to make a sealed connection to the grease gun and it won't pump properly. Once that's in there, then you can take your finger and open the pop tab like any other pop can, like so. Pull that back. It's going to expose the other side of the tube. Wipe off the excess grease. You're going to dispose of that as well, like so. And then now you have a loaded sleeve with a new tube of grease, and you're going to put that back into the grease gun. You're going to tighten it with just your hand. You don't need to over tighten these. Get it snug, okay? And then now you're going to take the handle and you're going to pull out to get it off that detent and let it slide back in to where it wants to seat, okay? Now that that is loaded, we're going to need to take a look to see if the tube needs primed. And now what is priming? That means getting rid of the air in the grease tube. On both manual pumps and battery powered pumps, grease guns rather, you're going to have this little button here that releases air, right? If necessary, you can hold that in and give the grease gun a pump, right? Or you can sit here and try and give it a pump, and eventually grease will start flowing again, like so. If you're having problems with your grease gun, don't be afraid to ask for help. All right, now we're going to talk about lubricating the slides of the boom and the chain. To lubricate the chain, we're going to want to use Zep Chain Lube. If you don't know where this is, you can ask one of the shop mechanics and they'll help you find it. Okay? We're going to take this and we're simply just going to spray it on. Right? Just enough to cover. And that's it. Very quick, easy process. To lubricate the sides of the telescopic boom, we're going to use a spray-on white lithium grease. You can use the same red and tacky grease that we used for the grease fittings, but as was told to me, some grease is better than no grease. So we're going to use white lithium grease, leaves less mess, but you may have to apply it a little bit more. You'll notice, right, some shiny spots on this side of the boom here and here, right? That's what we're looking to cover with the white lithium grease. You want to ensure that you're getting all 4 sides of the boom. Just like with greasing the grease fittings or the grease zerks, you're going to want to apply your chain lubricant and the white grease, the white lithium grease to the boom slides once a week. It's real easy to see when you have maybe screwed up on the controls with the grapple and you've hit the wall with the grapple. It's easy to sever the hose, right? You're gonna get a big mist of hydraulic fluid or gush of hydraulic fluid, and you need to do your best to get it back into the grapple box and turn the truck off as quick as possible. That's worst case scenario. However, best case would be knowing what to look for, especially if your hoses are in older or in rough shape. Now, this is a new hose, so it's got a nice black jacket on it, right? Like so. You can see the crimp marks here, right, with this characteristic bubble and the ribs, right? Like so. What we're looking for is if you have this bubble, if it looks deformed or if it's not there, or if these ribs look, if anything about this looks uncharacteristic or it looks funky, then it may have been crimped wrong. Now, we have the luxury of making our own hydraulic hoses, which is fantastic because it saves us a lot of money. But humans make errors, and there could be some human error in them sometimes. So it's important to take the time to look at your hose before you replace it to make sure that it's in good shape and condition. Generally, when you see the rotation hoses in the grapple box and they've been on the grapple for a while, they're going to be beat up. They're going to see chunks taken out of them. You're going to see the metal braided jacket that's inside of this, right, sticking out a little bit. You may see some areas that have been rubbing for a while, right? If you see the metal jacket, know that that's a weak point. If you see a big dent or this has been dented down here, these 90-degree fittings, they've been bent over in different places, know that that's a weak point. And those are important things to know and to note if you are getting in that grapple and doing your pre and post-trip inspections. All right, now we're going to talk about changing out a rotation hydraulic hose. These are the short hoses that you should have 2 of during your pre-trip. They're located here. There's 4 of them. They come from this point and they are nice and hidden and live on the back side here. This controls your grapple head functions. If you're familiar with changing a Prentice hose like we've had in the past, this process is not too different. But there are some key differences. The biggest one being that there is a retaining bolt here for these 2 hoses, and there's one over here for these 2 hoses. If you notice, this one is actually sheared at the moment, so that's going to need to be fixed. So we're going to use, for this demonstration, we're going to use this hose here on the outside as our hose that needs replacement. It's a perfectly fine hose, but we're going to pretend that it's the one that we need to change out. So the first step is going to be taking this 11/16 inch wrench, and we're going to take this and we're going to crack the bolt like so. And what that's going to do is that's going to release these 2 hoses, and we're going to be able to bring them out towards us a little bit. So we've unthreaded this bolt a little bit. What we're going to do now is there's only a certain number of threads, and then it's just a smooth shank. So we can pull this out. I'm going to keep hold of the hose. I'm going to pull this out, right? There's going to be some tension that wants to pull it back this way, but there's also some play. And if you notice, there's a hole here and a hole back here. What you can do is you can use that bolt again to put it into the rear hole, and that'll hold it in place for you while you make your change. Then once you have this in place and you can get your wrench on it, it's going to be easier if it's one of these outside hoses. Generally, you may have to take off one of these hoses these outside hoses to get to the inner hoses. It depends on the size of your fitting, and it depends on the size of the wrench. For this one in particular, I need to use a 7/8 wrench because that's what fits on the fitting right here. As we loosen the fitting, note that there is going to be some hydraulic fluid that comes out of this. So you're definitely going to want to have gloves, and it's going to get slippery because hydraulic fluid is very slippery. You'll eventually get to a point where it's only hand tight and you can use your fingers to bring it off. You can see a little bit of hydraulic flow there, and that's the first section of the hydraulic hose removed. So we've removed the top side of the hose that we are replacing, right, which is this hose that's loose. Now what's important to recall is that this was our outside hose on the top side, and if I pull it down to me, right, it's loose. But notice that right here, the hose actually goes to the second fitting, or one of the inner fittings, on the circle head itself. So it's crucial that we remember which hose goes to what fitting in the order of, especially if you need to replace multiple hoses at the same time. Getting them mixed up will change your controls and could potentially damage something. You would then take the wrench, in this case it would be the 7/8 wrench, and you would need to figure out what is the best positioning of the wrench to get in here and to undo this fitting. Fortunately for this is the same fitting, or the same size wrench, and I would loosen it by going lefty loosey, righty tighty, and then I would take this whole hose off. I would dispose of it properly, and then I would take and I would put the new hose back on. Once you have the new hose, you're going to take and you're going to finger tighten this bottom 90-degree fitting down here. You don't want to put a wrench on it yet because you want it to wiggle around a little bit. And then you're going to take the other end of the hose and you're going to direct it back to that top side. Then you're going to take that top fitting and you're going to finger tighten the top fitting so that there's both sides have a little bit of wiggle room so that you can move it around and adjust it where you need to be. Once you have that where you want it to be, then you can take your wrench and you can tighten them down. We're back on that top side. We're going to put this fitting back on to the threads, but notice how there's some dirt and some grease that's gotten in here, right? And that may happen because of them living inside the side boxes of the Grapple. You just want to wipe them off with a paper towel because the less dirt inside the system, the better. Okay? Then we're going to take this and we're going to thread this back on, right? Taking our time. There's no need to cross thread anything. If you feel some resistance, you're cross threading. We're going to get that finger tight like so, and then you're going to take your wrench and you're just going to start tightening. Once you have your new hydraulic hose all tightened up with the wrench on both sides, then it's time to get it back to its original position. This is crucial because if we don't put this bolt back in the proper holes and we forget about the bolt, what's going to happen is when we turn the Grapple on, it's going to cause problems down the boom because there's going to be tension in the lines and it's going to pull these this way, potentially breaking fittings and causing problems down the road. So I'm going to pull this bolt back out like so. Then I'm going to take this one here and then I'm going to do my best to line up on the top hole where it was, like so. Sometimes you can use a wrench if necessary to get a little leverage and bring it back up. Like that. And line up the holes. Like so. Okay. So now I've got the pin in both of these blocks, and then now I just need to use a wrench to tighten that bolt down, and then these will be seated back where they were. On the side of the hydraulic tank, you're going to find a gauge that shows you how much hydraulic fluid is in here. It's very difficult to see with the hoses, but this will be how you can check how much fluid is in the hydraulic tank. It's important to know that hydraulic fluid expands when it gets heated or when it gets hotter. So as you run the truck, this is going to rise up. If you need to add hydraulic fluid to your grapple truck because the fluid level is too low, you can use this 55-gallon drum pump and the appropriate size drum, the Accurate AW46 hydraulic fluid, along with this handy dandy little gun to add hydraulic fluid to your tank. It runs off of compressed air, so we need to add it to the air hose on the exterior of the building. So you're going to need an air hookup for this hydraulic 55-gallon drum. All right, you're going to hook this up to it like so. All right, and then you're going to need, this happens to be a 15/16 inch wrench, and you are going to loosen this fitting to be able to add hydraulic fluid to it. Like so. All right, I'm going to keep that clean and keep it safe where you know it is. Then you're going to want to use the gun attached to the pump on the hydraulic drum. You're going to want to take this and you're going to want to open the end, which opens the nipple, right? Otherwise you're not going to add any fluid, and then you're going to want to add fluid. Once you're done filling up, you want to close up the end of that again, and then store the gun on the 55-gallon drum with the hose, like so. Then you can disconnect your air, put the 55-gallon drum back, retract your air hose, and then return your cap to its original position. Just get it snug. It doesn't have to be super tight. Okay, and that's how you add hydraulic fluid to the hydraulic tank on these grapple trucks. The process may look a little bit different to open the cap for the hydraulic tank depending on the truck, because these tanks are going to be in different locations. It's no surprise that we work around trees, and trees produce a lot of tree debris. A lot of that tree debris, sticks, leaves, mulch, chips, acorns, pine cones, anything, are going to get stuck in all kinds of crevices in here. It's really important when we are servicing these that we take the time to reach in and get a lot of this stuff out, because over time what's going to happen, especially around this hydraulic fluid cooler, is you're going to have a buildup of debris, and it's not going to do as good a job of cooling down the hydraulic fluid. And again, when components don't work together, they begin to cause problems. There's pine cones. So it's important to take the time to get into these tight spots and get this tree debris out. And that includes here around the cooler and around the turret most often. All right, some of the key metal components that you're going to want to ensure and or tighten to make sure that they don't fall off, because they're crucial components, are going to be as follows. So the first one being down here on the head, you have this this hose protector, right? It's held on with two of these large Allen key head screws, right? And even as I touch this, I can tell that this one is loose, right? So you want to ensure that we get these tightened down, because this will end up rattling and sometimes it will fall off. And this is not a light piece of metal. You also don't ever want to raise the grapple head off of this point. This is not a this is not a lifting point, rather. Other metal components on the grapple itself include a lot of the smaller bolts that hold segments together. So clearly the turret ring has a lot of bolts that hold it together, but you can also see the pump on the side. There are bolts that hold that to the turret ring that are prone to coming loose because everything is going to vibrate ever so slightly. Not only are those bolts prone to coming loose, but believe it or not, even these enormous frame bolts and nuts are prone to coming loose. We've had some of these shear off in the past, and it's important to take the time to at least double check that these are tight. If you can move any of these with your fingers, that is a concern and it needs to be looked at by a mechanic. And that goes for just about any bolts that you find that you are afraid are going to compromise the structural integrity of the grapple. All right, so we've covered a lot of maintenance items specifically for the Palfinger Epsilon M13A grapple, but that's the most common one that we have now in our fleet currently. So hopefully this was all very helpful for you. The best part about these training videos is that you can go back and reference them at any point and as many times as you want. So if you have a problem with your truck or you're not sure how to maintenance it specifically, please ask. There are no dumb questions when it comes to maintaining the trucks and other vehicles in this fleet. The whole point is that we want you to be safe. We want you to learn how to maintain these things. And at the end of the day, that makes us a better company. So hopefully this was helpful, and we'll see you next time.